Greetings, MacNNers. Welcome back and Happy New Year. It's episode 46 of the MacNN Podcast. Welcome back, MacNNers. Always a pleasure to have you with us, as usual, for another great year. I'm Charles Martin. I'm the editor of MacNN, and joining me tonight is managing editor Mike in Virginia.
Hello.
And Bradley over in an undisclosed location in BC. Welcome.
Hello.
First up, we have a lot to talk about. Of course, we took a couple of weeks off, and so the news is just piled up around here. We've really got to get a shovel and get all this stuff out. But before we get to all the amazing news that is coming down the pike, we just want to mention, a little bit of a plug for our own stuff. We've just put out a new book, and we think it will help a lot of people. It's called MacNN Pointers. It's by myself and William Gallagher, and it is a collection of some of our favorite pointers columns that we've done, which we do 3 times a week on the site. And it goes all the way back to the beginning and covers all the way up to very recently. So there's some gems that are all kind of related together. And in this particular one, we're really trying to focus on you getting more out of your Apple software. That's the theme of this particular volume. There will be other volumes. What? It's true. But if you can, you should pick it up. It's available on iBooks or Kindle, and it's a whole 99 cents. What?
I know, right?
99 cents. You can't even get sugar at Starbucks for that kind of money. So if you know somebody who could use it, if you're doing tech support for somebody in your family, we've all been there, you should pick up a copy of this book and all subsequent volumes, but at least this one.
Let me just interject here. If you're part of a user group, this is not something you normally get with a book purchase, okay? We are giving you a license to do training based on the topics in the book as presented, and all you have to do is say that we did it first. That's all you got to do.
Yeah.
You don't normally get that. You don't normally get to present a book in front of an audience without paying an additional license fee, but we're giving you a license to do so, and it is explicitly spelled out in the book. So you don't just have to say, well, they said so in the podcast. It's in the book.
Right.
It says you can do it.
And we've actually been experimenting with that for a little while. We've been running the pointers column with my local Mac user group, and we get all kinds of compliments on it, which is why we thought, oh, you know what? We should gather this together. And in particular, we should make some provision for the Mac user groups because they perform an incredibly valuable function. And it's not just for seniors who always struggle with computers because they didn't grow up with them. It's because it provides a community service. It's because it continues to correct rumors or dispel mistruths. It's a great place to find the right dealer in town to service your Mac. This is super important. And it's a great social occasion. I have made some lifelong friends as a result of my involvement in Mac user groups. So I can't recommend them highly enough. They're fantastic.
Well, we actually just got some interesting information about the load, shall we say, of Mac users and their skill level. You want to talk about it?
Yes, please. I'm always interested in this stuff.
Well, why don't you play the music and let's go for it.
Oh, right. Oh, God. Hang on. Where's the music? Oh,
Get the card.
I wasn't prepared. Hang on.
I know.
Here it is. All righty, we're back. There, music and everything.
Okay, gang, here's the situation. Discussing in the forum, we talked about the feature thief again this week. We revisited it just very briefly to say maybe you should go take a look at this, and it regenerated the conversation about things that Apple does to its users.
Yeah, for those of you who missed the original series, with this little new article that we've written links back to it, and it was talking about how Apple comes over to your house being an app that you really love, burns it down, promises it will build you a new one, usually does, usually even better. Sometimes the bathroom is missing.
Yeah. So anyway, me and a couple of minions went to a couple different Apple stores with permission this morning, both with mall permission and Apple Store permission. And we loitered outside the Apple Store. And I wanted to get a pool of 1,000 users to meet this particular criteria about iOS devices, but I got some other information along the way.
So these are not your friends or a group you're already familiar with. These were people coming in and out of Apple stores.
These are people specifically coming out of Apple stores.
Cool.
In an hour and 58 minutes, we got 1,009 responses.
And we converted 47 people to Hare Krishna.
Well, not exactly. But interestingly, of those 1,009 people we asked coming out of the Apple Store, 1,000 of them were iOS users. Okay. The average length of time that these people have been using iOS is 2.1 years. It's a very even bell curve. There's really not much in the way of I just got one for the first time ever. So that was an interesting discovery.
Yeah.
Now, this is the one that got me. Question 2 was, do you or have you ever owned a Mac? And of those 1,000 people that qualified that had an iOS device, 782 of them said no.
Wow, 78.2%.
Yep. We then asked the 218 people, are you a current user? And then that came down to be exactly 200 people actually currently are using a Mac. Now, of those 200, 38 of them said that they had the capability to format a hard drive or pick a new iTunes file. So 38 out of 200, and 2 of them out of that 200 said that they're OS X support professionals. So just on that, buy the Pointers book.
Yeah.
Because either you or somebody you know needs it.
Yeah, it is. I think it's kind of impressive, actually, that 30% of the people coming in and out of an Apple store are actual Mac users, given that the majority of the store doesn't sell Macs.
Well, it's 22% actually, but
yes.
Close.
Well, sorry. But 78%, this does sort of help some people understand why Apple's focus isn't on the Mac as much as it was back in the 90s, for example.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the reasons why we did this. And the survey we did was very quick. Everyone was in and out in 30 seconds. So I don't have super in-depth historical information on any of these people. Okay. Now moving on. Question 4 was, is your phone just an appliance, or do you know how to perform basic troubleshooting such as restoring from iTunes? 712 of the 1,000 people said it's just a phone and they've got no idea about maintenance or caretaking or anything like that.
Wow.
Question 5, do you want future versions of the iPhone to be thinner? Without context, I just tossed that question out there. We'll get to the reason why in a minute. 902 of the 1,000 people said yes, that they would like a thinner phone.
Wow. That's 90%.
90%. And question 6 was, think about the iPhone 6S, not the Plus. That was specifically addressed. Think about the 6S screen size, not the Plus screen size.
Right, 4.7 inches.
Is that a good size, or do you want bigger or smaller? 204 of them said the 6S was fine. 709 of them wanted the 6 Plus or bigger. And 87 of them like the iPhone 5 size factor. So 1 in 10 want the smaller phone.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah. See, this is the thing I keep saying when people bring up this new 4-inch device that they think Apple is making. I'm like, Apple already sells a 4-inch screen. It's called the 5S. And for the 1 in 10 people who want one, it's fabulous because it was a great phone.
Yeah. We'll talk a little bit about the demographics of the sampled area in a few minutes, though. The last question, question 7, is rumor is that Apple will eliminate the headphone jack in favor of wireless or Lightning headphones. And this is a 2-part question. If true, will this have any effect in your day-to-day use? 723 of these people said it would have no effect. 189 of them said it would have a detrimental effect. Okay, that's not quite 1,000. The rest of them just said,
Yeah, what headphone jack? Oh, look at that.
Right. I think that's exactly right. I think it's like headphone. Oh, hey, Now, is this a bad idea or a good idea? Removing the headphone jack. 132 people said it was a bad idea. Okay, that's less than the 189 people said it would have a bad effect on their day-to-day use.
Yeah, I would be one of those people who didn't think it was a bad idea, but it would affect my use.
412 of the 1,000 people said it would be a good idea. Just, hey, yeah, what a good idea. And some of them said, being that I was one asking some of the questions, some of them said, hey, they'd make the phone thinner that way, wouldn't they? Mm-hmm. And the remainder, the more than 400 people said that they really didn't have any idea whether it was going to be a good idea or bad. And the general impression was that they didn't give a rat's ass about that.
Right. And this is the thing. There's a growing chasm between what I'm going to call them the veteran Mac establishment or the veteran Apple establishment believe is good and right and true and proper, and what, most of Apple's customers think is good and right and true and proper.
Yeah, and I made this point in the forums, and I seem to have to keep beating this drum. I know what I want. I am an OS X user with iOS as a peripheral to my OS X machine. However, the actual Apple use case is the other way around.
Right.
The vast majority of Apple's current customer base are now iOS users primarily, and they might have a Mac associated with it. And that's it. I mean, the number is clear. Have you ever owned a Mac? 782 of them said no.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, how can you argue with that? And let's consider the demographic of the area that the survey was done in. Yes, it was done in Northern Virginia, which is a very rich area. I get that. But that would actually skew the Mac numbers higher, not lower.
Yeah, that's true. So there's been many previous surveys that show that the wealthier you are, the more likely you are to own a Mac.
Right. So while I appreciate everything that we talk about with our loyal readers, the fact remains is our loyal readers are not the primary focus of the company. And the thing is, you can say that Apple has the resources to focus on all of us, and that's true and false to a certain point. If you're going to have as tightly an integrated experience as Apple wants you to have between OS 10 and the iOS, you have to make choices along the way to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm reasonably certain that Apple wants to get these 782 people to buy an OS 10 machine, and that's why we have the MacBook.
And here's the thing that I think everybody misses. You, of course, have picked up on it long ago. The more they make Macs like iOS, the more likely it is those 782 are going to eventually go, hey, this works a lot like I'm used to. I think I should get one.
That's right. Yeah. And that's why the MacBook exists. I understand. Believe me, I get it. The MacBook is not for everybody. Charles, it might be for you. You're a gallivanter. This is what you do.
This is the funny thing. Not for the first time in my history with Apple, they've come out with something and I went, no way is that coming into my house. And then a year later, I buy one or something. I'm not quite there with the MacBook yet, but all they have to do is one tiny thing, which I am certain they will do in the next revision, and I will get one. That's it.
A second USB-C port?
No, make it USB 3.1 for reals.
Yeah, I have no doubt that the next version of the MacBook is going to have it's going to be the Thunderbolt 3 port. I don't have any doubt in my mind.
Well, I doubt it. Because it's such a consumer machine, I doubt they'll even include the Thunderbolt circuitry, but
the reason why I think it is...
But they could.
The reason why I think it is the Thunderbolt 3 chipset is not significantly more expensive. Yes, there's a licensing fee, but since Apple's the one who is the main recipient of that's less of a problem. It's the same physical connector.
It is.
As USB-C, and the Thunderbolt 3 can do passive mode in Thunderbolt, which means you don't have to buy the $50 cables. There will be $10 Thunderbolt passive cables running at Thunderbolt 1.5 speeds.
Oh, well, now that does make a point, but this is the company that could have easily put 2 USB-C ports on that thing and didn't.
Actually, as it turns out, they couldn't have. Only recently are there controllers for USB-C to take power from either USB-C port. Very recently, before the last 2 months, and I've only recently discovered this, before the last 2 months, there were literally not controller chipsets. Basically, the same time that Google came out with their USB-C equipped machine, you had to say, this is your charging port, and this is just a data port. And that would have posed problems with users. And I'm reasonably certain that's why the first version of the MacBook only had one USB-C port, because the chipset just didn't exist.
Now, see, that actually makes sense. I'm so relieved to hear that there's a reason. Because, sometimes Apple does things and everybody's scratching their head. What? So I'm glad to hear that there was actually a reason. I don't know why they couldn't have told us that, but never mind.
Well, the reason why Apple didn't tell us that is because that makes things complicated. There's a reason why when I did this questionnaire, why I said use your phone as an appliance, use your OS 10 machine as an appliance, meaning you put it down and you sit it there.
Yeah.
And you don't have to get in there and blow dust out and do IRQs and do all this other crap.
Clean the registry.
You use it as an appliance. And I'm proving that out. And most of the users now are using their iOS devices and their OS 10 machines as appliances.
Yeah. We're finally at that day, which we talked about a long time ago. I'm just remembering, I couldn't tell you what year it was, but it was probably around the time that the G5 first came out. So this is quite a while back. At the keynote, several Apple executives spent a great deal of time talking about pipelines and what makes a processor do what it does and how this is more efficient than that, and that's why we're able to get better performance at a slightly lower speed, and so on. Easily 20 minutes on this. Deep tech talk. It wasn't even WWDC either, if I remember correctly. It was a public event, and they have never done that since because nobody cares.
Their audience has changed. That's in the late 80s and 90s and early part of this century. You picked an Apple machine, not always OS 10, obviously, but you picked an Apple machine not specifically because of the design, but because of how it did things. And there was the issue with people's phones getting stolen because you had the white earbuds, because now somebody knew that you had a $300 device in your pocket.
Yeah.
And do you hear about that now anymore? Not really.
Not much. iPhones still get stolen a lot, but they're much more useless now once they've been stolen than they used to be. And there is a growing intolerance of, looking the other way with stolen stuff.
Yeah.
So,
and Apple is selling appliances. Apple is selling appliances. That is what the user base that Apple has to cater toward now. People who want computing appliances as opposed to computers that you have to fiddle and tweak with.
Yeah. Everyone I know who runs an Apple TV is very much in that camp. And so we should have sort of seen this coming, actually. The Apple TV is an appliance.
Oh, yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, if it doesn't work properly, people are like, I have no idea what to do next. Now, there's going to be some people listening to this podcast going, but that's a terrible thing. Everybody should be deeply trained in computer maintenance technology. No. That's exactly the wrong path to take.
Well, what I'm going to say is to these people who say you should be trained in computer technology and maintenance. How about your car? How many of our readers actually change the oil in their car? How many of our readers change the refrigerant in their fridge and freezer in their kitchen?
Yeah.
Some of the things that you and I and most of our listeners used to do to computers 10 years ago
Yeah.
is akin to changing the refrigerant in your fridge in your kitchen.
Very much so. Very much so. And this is the thing. And this is one of the reasons that Apple started sealing up their machines. And by the way, Windows makers do this as well.
Yeah.
They're eliminating points of failure. The optical drive used to be a huge point of failure. Now, to be fair, Apple's decision to use slot loading complicated that.
Yeah.
I grant you. But the optical drive was a huge point of failure when Mike and I were techs. And so it had to go. It had to go. Somebody asked me the other day why the MacBook, the Retina MacBook, doesn't have a MagSafe plug, or why Apple couldn't invent a MagSafe compatible USB-C port. And I thought about it for a while, and I'm wondering now if it's not too light.
Well, that's the interesting point, is if the break strength on the cable would just haul the machine to the floor anyway. That's an interesting point. I hadn't thought about that.
I suspect it would, depending on the surface. That's the thing, is like when somebody trips over a wire. But as it happens, every perceived problem will receive a solution in the glorious world of tomorrow. And that is what has happened. And if you want to find that solution, like you'd like both USB-C and a MagSafe cable, it is possible, thanks to CES. CES is here.
Yeah, no, I love and I hate that. I'm just going to break in here, CES is the greatest artist of all time, but no, anyway.
The artist formerly known as Consumer Electronics.
I love and I hate the CES at the same time. You see some pretty stunning products every year, but you only see like half of them ever hit the market.
Yeah, about half of them hit the market, and only about 10% of those become, wow, this is great, and they're huge hits.
This year was the year of home automation and the year of USB-C.
Yeah.
And we talked about it when the MacBook came out. We knew that this was going to be the case. We knew that a year after USB-C on the MacBook came out, you were going to be able to get 9 million cables to everything you need to do. Well, they're here.
They're here.
Including a MagSafe breakaway charging cable.
Yeah. Griffin makes that, I believe.
Yep. And I'm sure there will be 10 more companies making them.
Yeah, because it's a great idea if it's attached to something a little weightier than a MacBook. But of course, this is the thing, and Intel's made this very clear. If they haven't made it clear to us Apple people, they've made it very clear to everybody else. USB-C is the port. The one port to rule them all. And it will, it's not going to happen overnight, but it's happening now. And it will continue to happen. Eventually, all of your computers will have USB-C ports, nothing else.
Well, we talked about this a little bit earlier in the podcast. The Thunderbolt 3 uses the USB-C connector.
Right.
Thunderbolt 3 contains USB-C, but USB-C does not necessarily contain Thunderbolt 3.
Right.
So I think that what we're going to see on the MacBook Pro and similar computer lines from other manufacturers, we're going to see with 3 Thunderbolt 3 / USB-C ports. And I think on the lower end machines, like the MacBook Airs, which I think are still going to exist even in a MacBook world,
yeah,
it's just going to be, well, this one is Thunderbolt and these other 2 are USB-C or something similar to that.
Yeah, because this combo port can be in almost any other kind of port you can imagine. It can be an Ethernet port. It can be a FireWire port. It can be a USB-A port. It can be
a 4K video port.
4K video port, audio port, just about everything. It can, it handles video, it handles data, it handles power. So it is literally the one port to rule them all. And I think that the MacBook, the Retina MacBook, was just a sneak preview of what was coming. Now we're seeing more and more models. The Surface Pro has it. The Google Chromebook Pixel C has it. And a bunch of others. I think HP has brought out 2 new models with USB-C.
Oh, God. At the CES, a whole bunch of different ranges of machines had the USB-C built in. So not all of them have Thunderbolt 3. I think there were 2 or 3 machines that had Thunderbolt 3, and they're the higher-end machines.
Yeah.
But we'll see that change as time goes on.
Well, maybe. I think that Apple, Intel, and a lot of other companies kind of like the idea of having distinctions between their professional lines and their consumer lines, and USB-C or USB-C with Thunderbolt 3 is one of those. So yeah, that could shake out exactly the way FireWire and USB 1 used to do.
Yeah, I agree.
If you wanted fast, you wanted FireWire.
Yeah, you know what? Let me just take a quick detour here. Also in the forums, we see a lot of complaints about, FireWire 800 isn't. What is the use case for FireWire anymore? I'm genuinely puzzled puzzled about that.
I use my FireWire port on my 2012 MacBook Pro. It's a FireWire 800 port, and I use an adapter to connect it to an old FireWire 400 drive. That's it.
Oh, God.
That's it. I may still, although I haven't used it in years, I may still have a video camera around here that I'm probably keeping around because of 8mm tapes that I have.
Oh, you know what? Video cameras. I completely forgot about video cameras.
Yeah,
that's right.
And I'll need a way to, until I get a FireWire Thunderbolt adapter, I'll need a way to attach that camera. But that's, I mean, we're talking antiques here, literally antiques, at least in computer years. So yeah, the case for FireWire is disappearing, and Thunderbolt is just way better. So yeah, unless you have something that needs to transmit power through your FireWire cable. I just thought of something right here in the drawer behind me, which you can hear. In that drawer is a 3rd generation iPod, which still functions, but I haven't used in a while, but it's only got a FireWire port.
I mean, personally, I have nothing against USB-C. It's not something I ever planned for, but seeing as my next computer will likely be another Mac, I'm sure by the time I'm ready to get one, it'll be there. Just as Thunderbolt, it wasn't something I was planning on getting, but knowing I was going to get a Mac, it showed up, and so I sort of just knew it would be there.
Yeah, well, it looks like it's going to become inevitable, although knowing Apple, it will take at least 2 years for it to spread out across the line.
Yes.
I'm sure the MacBook Pro will have more than one port.
Somewhere down the line, it's inevitable, it seems.
I think we're going to see USB-C and Thunderbolt 3 on the MacBook Pro sooner rather than later. And the reason why I think that is because Thunderbolt 3 is a transformative technology like we talked about a little bit earlier. Mm-hmm. The Retina MacBook Pros haven't seen as many upgrades as you think they would given Intel's cycle because there hasn't been a compelling performance increase from generation to generation since the 2012 MacBook Pro Retina.
True.
I've got a 2012 MacBook Pro Retina, and a maxed out 2015 15-inch MacBook Pro Retina is about 15% faster across the board. And that's not a hugely compelling difference to convince someone to drop $2,500 on a new machine. Yeah, it's Thunderbolt 2 instead of Thunderbolt 1, but the performance difference and, like I said before, the ability to use passive Thunderbolt cables on Thunderbolt 3, I think is going to be a huge selling point for a new machine that's got those technologies.
And I think from an audio and Creative Pro and musician perspective, USB-C and Thunderbolt 3 are going to be a great combination, but like with everything, whenever you change the ports, there's a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth, and it'll take Pro Tools, several years to get up to speed on it and so on and so forth, the usual hassles and headaches. But I think this time the end result is actually going to be worth the pain that we're all going to have to go through, those of us who have any kind of audio gear to attach. It's time to unplug the FireWire ports maybe, and time to start looking at what the future is going to be. And the future is very clearly going to be USB-C and Thunderbolt.
Well, let's do a little deobfuscation here. The future is USB 3.1. Mm-hmm. Okay, the USB-C is a port. As I was saying, there is 3.1 A and B ports. A port is the conventional port that you see on the side of a MacBook now. The Type B with USB-C 3.1 is a little bit different. It's got a little projection off of it. So I guess I'm not really fully up to date on what exactly goes where electrically in that. And the USB-C is still USB 3.1, just in that more lightning-y type connector.
Yeah.
So while you can have USB 3.1 on a Type A connector, you can't have Thunderbolt on a Type A connector. You can only have Thunderbolt on a Type C connector. It's a little bit confusing if you look at it. You can have Thunderbolt and USB-C, but you can't have, if you have USB-C, you don't necessarily have Thunderbolt.
Right. That's exactly right.
So let's just, maybe we're going to do an explainer on this in the not too distant future.
Yeah.
Because there's Venn diagrams overlapping this, that, and the other thing. So maybe it's something we need to discuss in the not too distant future.
Yeah, maybe. So for those of you who've never been, CES in Las Vegas is a gigantic show, a huge trade show, essentially, of forthcoming consumer electronics, most of which are announced there, but aren't actually going to show up for anywhere up to a year. But normally they'll ship in the next 3 to 6 months, typically. There's a lot of cool devices coming down the pike. One of the things that we haven't talked about enough at the moment is HomeKit. This is going to be huge, and it's a big year for Apple because they introduced HomeKit 2 years ago, and it is just finally now starting to arrive in a huge way. One of the devices that really caught my fancy was a First Alert, a company that is better known for their burglar alarms, I suppose, brought out a HomeKit safe. Now, you're like, safe? You mean like dial and stethoscope safe? Yes, that's right. Safe. For documents and things. And the dial has nothing on it. No numbers. So all those 1940s gangsters you were worried about are foiled. So why does it have HomeKit? What does that mean? Well, it means you can open or lock the safe with your phone or Siri command. That's kind of nice. But what I thought was really cool about it was this also adds the intelligence to notify you on your device, no matter where you are, if the safe is moved or opened in other manners.
Other manners. Nice.
Yeah, you know. And just the idea that the safe would notify you when it's moved, I thought, hey, why doesn't every ATM machine in the world have that yet? Because that would probably be good.
I agree that HomeKit is going to be huge this year. However, I am not going to jump into home automation anytime soon other than something like smartphone turning on and off lights. Really not super excited right now about the state of security for home automation. It's kind of the wild frontier, and it really hasn't been penetrated tested that heavily yet.
Yeah. Although we did see a very nice door lock that actually looks attractive and has all three methods. It's got a key.
Yep.
It has a number pad.
Yep.
And it has the HomeKit. Only the number pad and the home key part are dependent on batteries, right? Power.
Yeah. Yeah,
So-
of course.
That seemed like a good idea.
Power, I'm less concerned about it, even in the course of this recording, this podcast, I've lost power 3 times. It's internet security just bugs me with some of this. And I know that there are new protocols, and I know that everyone is saying that this is so securely locked down, but it never really is. Just ask Target, just ask Home Depot. There's always something you forgot. There's always something the device manufacturer forgot.
And there are manufacturers and merchants who care about security, and there are manufacturers and merchants who do not.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a feeling that the lower, cheapest end of HomeKit stuff is going to be, I don't know.
A little wild frontier-y, yeah. I'm personally, as much as I love technology and as much as I'm surrounded by computers and iOS devices and other assorted electronic gadgetry, I am waiting on home automation.
Yeah. Although I will say that there's been a series of articles written by Amber. Amber Neely, the only staff member who never appears on the podcast. She's so shy. Anyway, she's our kick-ass reviewer, and she has been doing a whole bunch of work with various smart bulbs. And I have to tell you, reading these articles, I've really started to think to myself, yeah, I understand it. I get it now. I see why I should pay somewhere up to, but not including, $90 for a light bulb.
No, I know. Some of these are not for a single bulb. And I understand that the $90 bulb had all kinds of cool color changing and things like that. And that doesn't come cheap. I get that. But wow, $90, right?
Yeah, but it should come cheap because the technology to add the color to a bulb is not really cost prohibitive. Let's put it that way. But I like that the prices are coming down. They're already coming down on those sorts of things. In fact, the company that made the $90 bulb said, you know what? Let's try this again at $60.
Yeah. When about 3 years ago, when the LED bulbs first started showing up in replacing CCFLs, they were easily $25 a bulb, and now they're just a couple bucks a bulb, and they're worth it. The light is better, I think, from an LED than a CFL. I mean, obviously a CFL has got some advantages, but as far as reading at everyday use, the LEDs are far superior in the house.
And I like the idea of color bulb, particularly like, for example, if I'm sick, I want everybody to know it. So I'll put on the sickly green color.
You put a green light in your window just to let everyone know.
Right, exactly. And, there's all kinds of uses for color bulbs. I'd love to get more sound-sensitive colored bulbs so that anytime you want, you can have a disco in your living room, So I like the idea, but also I like the idea of control. I like the idea of being able to have the lights on or off when I leave or arrive, or just before that point. This, particularly for people like me who travel a lot, locking down the house and turning off all the things is a chore, like remembering where the luggage is and packing it. It's a chore.
Oh, yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that there isn't a utility for home automation.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just waiting to check the security frontier first.
There's a saying going around that this year's CES is, the theme of it is the toaster fridge awakens.
Yeah.
In meaning that all these appliances, and there are tons of them coming, that are smarter.
Yep.
And some of them you will think, that's a really good idea. And then some of you go, what?
Well, Samsung's CES keynote, I believe their refrigerator that they showed that takes the pictures and identifies how much you have of various condiments and whatnot. I'm reasonably certain that's a $5,000 refrigerator.
Yeah. good luck. But on the other hand, we saw one that was a smart pet bowl that you could remotely set what time. If you weren't going to be home, you could still remotely feed your pet on a regular schedule. And they, from what I understand, pets like that.
Well, the thing is I don't currently have any pets, but I'm reasonably certain that I had a time solution just with a mechanical timer.
Right.
For when the traveling that I was doing in the early part of the century. And the cats figured out how to defeat the lock. So unless this is a really super secure device thing, I'm not holding my breath on this one.
I was going to say that this is the fundamental difference between dogs and cats. Dogs want you to be there to feed them. Cats don't need you, but they do need the food.
Yep.
But let me ask you this, Mike. You've looked at an awful lot of these devices that have come along that have been announced over the last few days. It doesn't have to be a HomeKit thing necessarily, but is there one particular device that you went, yeah, I'm going to get that when it comes out?
You see, the thing is this year wasn't really revolutionary as far as I was concerned. There wasn't anything that I said, wow, this is going to change the future. Like I said earlier, this is the year of USB-C and HomeKit. And I already told you I was going to do with HomeKit. And I'm just happy to see USB-C progress. It's another situation where USB-C is going to change the frontier the same as USB did over serial ports back in 98, 99.
Yeah, or the way that Apple's bold move into USB back with the original iMac blew up everybody's preconceived notions, and there was a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth. But then, very quickly, that all settled down.
Yeah, there's going to be adapters. There's going to be some teething pains on the way.
Yeah,
but this is a good technology. And we'll all get there together.
Bradley, it's time for you to give us your thoughts on this. You have covered a lot of CES. What have you seen that you thought was a really interesting device that you'd be interested in owning yourself?
I didn't see a lot out of CES this year. I think the most interesting thing I actually read up on a little more was Origin released a all-in-one PC.
Oh, is that right?
I think it's a ultra-wide monitor with the full gaming PC built into the back. I can't remember the specs, but it's full desktop grade sort of equipment. It's not like they're using the mobile equivalents of anything.
Right. Oh, nice.
It's an all-in-one with a wart. The full-size PCI 2-slot video card is on this huge bump on the back of the case. So it's not exactly what you call an elegant design.
No.
Particularly the duct tape where they attach the PC. That's
no. Origin does some fantastic work.
True.
And the fact that even on the back of this mammoth monitor, they kept it as slim as they did and used desktop components to do it. So this is still, say what you will about PC manufacturers, this is a feat of thermal engineering to get this done.
Yeah, well, I was just about to say, I wonder where the heat vent is on this thing because it needs one. But yeah, that sounds really intriguing. See if you can get a review unit.
I'll see what I can do.
Delivered in crate airdrop by 5 drones suspending it over Canada as it arrives.
Well, it certainly wouldn't be an unladen African swallow at any rate.
No, it'd be several hundred of them.
Indeed. The thing that has caught my eye the most, because I am sort of toying with the idea of a MacBook, a Retina MacBook as one of my next portables, is the small but incredibly useful adapters and USB-C docks, those little hubs that attach right onto it and don't add a great deal of bulk. They're nice and thin and light, but they attach onto a Retina MacBook, and they suddenly you have whatever combination of ports you want. I've seen some with Ethernet, USB-A, a couple of those, and an HDMI, or that plus an SD card reader, or just mix and match, whatever you want.
The usability of those will be greater when it's full USB 3.1.
Agreed.
I'm really concerned about shared bandwidth right now on the USB-C connector. It's just not fast enough to do 4K and transfer data off an SSD and transfer gigabit Ethernet at the same time. It's just not right.
Right.
Now the full USB-C 3.1, not the 3.0 that they've got right now. The full 3.1 is going to be nice. It's going to be really nice, and I'll wait on that.
Yeah, that's why I can't wait for spring. If they're going to do a MacBook revision this year, I expect it'll be around then, possibly later in the year. But
yeah, but here's the thing. All these cables now are USB-C 3.1.
Right.
Everything that came out, or everything that was announced at CES is all 3.1. It's all the faster 3.1.
Right, which is great because you can use it with the Retina MacBook right now, but it will actually get faster when you attach it to something that has actual 3.1 on it.
That's correct.
So it's a good investment. The accessories are a good investment going forward, so there's no reason not to buy them now. It's just waiting on, for me anyway, I'm waiting on the next revision of the Retina MacBook, and then I will reconsider.
Yeah, here's the thing. I really, really dig Thunderbolt, and I've done some work on it. Thunderbolt 2 is fabulous. And USB-C 3.1, while it's not as real world, not going to be as fast as even Thunderbolt 2, it has the same flexibility that Thunderbolt 2 has, and Thunderbolt 1 for that matter. So I'm really looking forward to wider implementation of USB 3.1.
I'm embarrassed to admit that I have only used my Thunderbolt port for video, nothing else ever.
And that's fine. I mean, but that's the same kind of inherent flexibility where instead of, like in ye olden days, a USB 2 video breakout box was USB to a box to your device.
Right.
Now USB 3 and Thunderbolt 3 and USB 3.1, it's cable to your device because the DisplayPort protocol is embedded in the USB-C 3.1 and Thunderbolt 3 specification to begin with. No box.
Yeah, exactly. This 2012, I might amusingly mention this 2012 MacBook Pro that I use. It has a Thunderbolt 1 port and a mini DisplayPort. Even at the time, I went, well, why? And the reason was because the Thunderbolt video adapter was like $50.
Yeah, price. I mean, at the time, a regular DisplayPort connector and the chipset for the DisplayPort was way cheaper than just Thunderbolt.
Plus, I think this is good news for Thunderbolt. Not only will it become a much more mainstream implementation, still probably aimed at pro audiences, but the fact that the connector is the same means that the price is going to come down on just about everything. So I think it's good news. If you're a Thunderbolt fan, I think this is good news for you coming down the pike.
Yeah, I agree. This makes Thunderbolt peripherals way less expensive.
One other area that we haven't talked about yet too much that was also a big thing at CES was CarPlay. CarPlay, and to a lesser extent Android Auto, are really coming out now. It has been far too long, and the car manufacturers moved way too slow, although I'm sure they would say that they moved at lightning speed for them. But CarPlay is now starting to get incorporated into more vehicles. There were a number of vehicle announcements from major vehicle makers at CES, and that leads us to our next topic. Car talk! All of this new CarPlay announcement, CarPlay finally coming out in the 2016 and in particular the 2017 model year cars from nearly everybody. Toyota's kind of the big holdout now, but just about everybody else has embraced it at this point. About a third or so of all the announcements we've heard also say that Android Auto is included. I have a feeling it will be more like half by the time it's all done, but for those of you who use Android phones, I think you're going to have a good selection of cars that will also be compatible with yours. But CarPlay is the one that gets all the attention just because of the Apple mystique, I guess. But I have to say, I may be in the market for a car next year, actually probably later this year. And that car has to have CarPlay. Has to. That is not even a negotiating point. In fact, I'd go so far to say that I wouldn't buy a new car that didn't have CarPlay, but not only that, I would say I wouldn't buy a car that didn't have CarPlay included, not an add-on. I don't want to half-ass this. I want a manufacturer who thinks enough of that technology to include it. And yes, I have to admit, even though I'm not an Android person, I'd also like it to be compatible with Android Auto because I have friends who might want to ride with me, who might want to plug in.
Yeah, I think your number of 50% is actually going to be significantly higher than that.
Yeah, maybe.
I think it's probably going to be, CarPlay / Android Auto in just about everything in the next 6 months.
Well, there's no reason not to, really. It's just that some manufacturers have explicitly said we don't have Android Auto yet.
This is still shaking out, though.
There's one or two that have said it the other way around. They're putting Android Auto in first.
This is still shaking out. Like, for instance, Hyundai last week also, it's a paid upgrade. I forget the model year exactly for CarPlay on the Hyundai, on one model of Hyundai from last year. Philips just came out with a series of aftermarket add-ons for CarPlay. And actually, Jordan reviewed something ages ago.
Pioneer did too.
Pioneer, yep, okay. Jordan reviewed about 2 years ago the very early implementations of this kind of technology in the cars. It's an interesting growth thing for both Android and Apple. It's going to be, I'm curious to see how this all shakes out. I'm curious to see how long it takes for this to trickle down to lower end models of cars.
Well, I think we have a good historical precedent for this. How long did it take for Bluetooth to become standard in cars? How long did it take for GPS to become standard in cars?
The GPS thing is interesting because now everyone has a smartphone.
Right.
We'll see how this all shakes out. I think this is going to be accelerated. I think this is going to be faster than Bluetooth.
Get it? Car. Accelerate.
Yeah. we'll see. This is, again, a technology that I'm casting a wary eye on. I'm interested in this. I'm way more interested in this than I am in HomeKit.
Yeah. Although it all kinds of ties together because, you could be in your car using Siri to tell the garage door to open.
Well, again, like I said, my problem is somebody else telling Siri to open my garage door.
Yeah. Open says me. That's the whole key to it. All of this talk about CarPlay and the fact that it is now finally starting to become a mainstream thing has kicked up all the talk about Apple's making a car. And I want to take 1 second before we get into this, just to mention the origin of where we got the idea that Apple was making a car. The origin of that rumor is a bunch of vans with mapping equipment on their roofs. And everybody said that they're using that to test out driverless cars. And then, of course, Apple had to come out and say, no, it's mapping. Right. And so the whole foundation of this is based in nonsense. But there is unquestionably something to do with cars going on at Apple. That has become very, very clear. I mean, just improving maps has a lot to do with cars, but also it's pretty clear that they've got hardware people working on something for a car. Are they building their own car?
I still don't think so. I think that Apple has no interest in the mechanics of a car at all. I think this is all about the electronics of a car. I think, like I said in the previous issue, I think this is about the avionics of a car. I think this is about driving technologies. I think this is about driverless. I think this is about integration of driverless with the iOS ecosystem. I think that's what it's about. I don't think they care about the transmission and the tires and the oil and I don't think they care about any of that.
I agree with you. I don't think they're building their own car. And for one thing, that's a 20-year concept, really. It takes from drawing on a piece of paper to having it in a showroom is at least 10 to 15 to 20 years. That will explain a lot about why cars look the way they do now. But the other problem is that, you can't just decide, today I'm going to become a car maker. There's all kinds of regulations and procedures and permits and factories you have to build and so on and so forth. You can't just start making cars unless they're made out of Lego. So Apple's done none of this, and they wouldn't be able to hide it. So I certainly agree with Mike that they're not building their own car. Maybe working with an established manufacturer on the QT, that means secretly, to build a car. Well, okay, maybe something along the line. But I think Mike's right. I think it's the intelligence of the car that they're working on more than anything else. Certainly they're probably looking into driverless car technology because all of the tech companies seem to be doing this. And maybe Apple's got an idea that will distinguish theirs from anybody else's.
Yeah.
Driverless cars is still something that is it's like HomeKit. It's one of those things you're really going to have to sell people on it.
Oh, yeah. I certainly agree with that. Now, everyone made a big deal. Everyone, meaning mainstream press, about Apple having registered a whole bunch of domains involving Apple cars and things like that. But here's the thing. Apple buys up domains all the time.
Especially if they think somebody's going to squat on them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. But yeah, apple.car, apple.cars, and apple.autos, or apple.auto are the three domains that really caught people's attention.
Well, I'm pretty sure they also own apple.sucks. So I'm not putting a lot of weight on these purchases.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. I'm going to go look that up. But in the meantime, there is one area of car hardware that Apple may actually be working on beyond avionics. And that's batteries. Apple often doesn't get as much credit as Tesla for battery innovation, but in fact, they are a huge battery innovator, right up there with Tesla. And so more efficient batteries for electric cars, you bet. I think definitely they could be working on something like that.
Well, here's the thing. The battery technology in the MacBook, where they filled all these little nooks and crannies with battery, you're still not seeing that in the PC manufacturers. You're still seeing slabs of battery.
Yeah, just pre-cut off-the-shelf battery. Wedged in wherever they can.
Yeah, when Microsoft showed the cutaways of the Surface Book, just slabs of battery, not form-fit. It's just, and that did make a lot of sense to me. So that's something, Apple being an innovator in battery technology technology, yeah, they are. They're certainly a driving force because they do want to squeak out every last minute of use in their devices.
Yeah. And so I think they have a contribution to make in general power efficiency, but that also applies to cars, particularly as we get more and more electric vehicles, not hybrids, all electric vehicles, like the Nissan Leaf, for example.
They did show several all-electric vehicles at CES.
Yeah.
Not Apple, but there are a couple different companies that, all of a sudden now all-electric vehicles are back.
Yeah, exactly. So all electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles, obviously I think that represents real progress. And the hybrid vehicles in particular have been around for a decade or more. So their track record is now something you can look at and say, yes, this works as well or better than a conventional car. I often compare the computer business and the car business because cars, for the most part, haven't changed a whole lot. They actually have changed a great deal from 21st century cars to the original sets of cars, but the principles were mostly the same. Tires, headlights, steering, all that stuff. Yeah. We're only just now getting to the point where some of those things may not be necessary, particularly the steering wheel. You'll still need a steering wheel, but you know what I mean. The electronics have risen up to really power the innovation, both in the reduced pollution and in better fuel efficiency and all of that. It's all down to electronics these days.
I would totally use a joystick in the car, though. I would totally do that.
As long as I'm with you, as long as it'll have the little side button so I can fire the lasers. Because I'm desperately going to need to be able to launch missiles. I want James Bond's car or nothing.
Okay.
Anyway, so CarPlay becoming a big thing, Apple's car thing. This is the other issue that I have with the whole Apple building a car business is everybody's so hyped up about the idea, as they should be. It's exciting, but it's years away. Even if they've been working on this for 10 years, which they have not. But even if they've been working on it for 5 years, that would mean it's at least 5 more years from now. Maybe it's just me, but the attention deficit disorder audience that craves Apple gear is not going to wait 5 years for a car.
The market, Apple's been on top of the hill since, 2008?
Yes, arguably I'd say 2008. Right.
That's only 8 years ago.
It's a pretty impressive run, actually, but you're right. It's not that long in real years.
So in 4 or 5 years, what's Apple's market position going to be? Do we know? Is it going to be better? Is it going to be worse? Is Apple going to be in a position where a car is a good idea? We just don't know any of these things.
Yeah. There's only one way that something could come out from Apple in the next, let's say 2 years or 3 years that would justify this level of hype, and that is with a partner. So somebody somewhere is working on something that Apple clearly seems very excited about because they are hiring on it like crazy. But it's hard to guess at what it will be and when it will come out is the problem.
Yeah. I would be very surprised to summarize so we can move on to the next topic that's actually more exciting. Mm-hmm. To summarize, there's not going to be an all Apple built car. It's just not going to happen. Given existing market conditions, I just don't see it.
Yeah, or at least in any kind of current time frame, if ever. Yes, men love designing cars. And yes, men are largely in charge of Apple's design department. So I forgive you for thinking, they really want to design a car. But I think what those guys seem to me to be more interested in is making existing things way better. And if they're going in that direction, I cannot wait.
And believe it or not, the price of gas right now is operating against this concept. Gas in Virginia is $1.80 a gallon.
Yeah.
Electric cars are a great idea, but there is a certain price of gas where the electric car is now more expensive than a gas burner.
Yeah, which is bad. So, for the earth. So I'm actually hoping that price goes up, and I'm the weird one for thinking that. But it's true. Canada, where I live, is America's largest producer of oil, for gasoline and other purposes. And so the lower the price gets, the more this country is hurting. And at the moment, I thought I heard the other day that it had hit around $19 a barrel.
Oh, there you go.
That means I could buy a barrel of oil or 3 Starbucks.
Yikes.
No, that's just wrong. This is a crazy world we live in.
That doesn't even sound right. That's terrible.
But anyway, so yeah, you're right. There's bigger economic and other factors going on in this whole equation. So Apple has been amazingly prescient with the stuff that they emphasize. They started working on an Intel version of Mac OS X years and years before they thought they'd ever need it.
Oh, yeah, long before. Yeah.
And so I'm hoping that prescience didn't die with Steve Jobs, and I don't don't think it did.
Yep.
I think they're playing the long game, and I think they're really good at the long game. In fact, they're one of the few American companies still good at the long game. So all I can do is hope and be excited about what might be coming. Moving on. Our colleague Sanjeev rounded out his year by talking about what was his personal best and worst Apple product. Now, he limited himself to hardware, but we have no such restrictions here. And so as we have three of us here, I thought it would be fun to go around the table a bit and ask for your own personal best and worst Apple product, software, or service for 2015. Now, some of these will come with a qualifier that they'll probably get better in 2016. Most things do. But let me start with Bradley. Bradley, what was we'll just do best and then we'll do worst. Best Apple product of the year.
Oh man, you picked the one that I was less ready to talk about.
Good at that.
I'm going to say that despite having not purchased one, the 6S will be my best Apple product of the year. Mm-hmm. It just feels like a bigger jump than they normally take in the S stage. And it sets up a lot of things to get really interesting in the future, like the whole Force Touch, or 3D Touch, I guess as it's called on the phone.
Yeah, they don't want to get sued by Star Wars.
My apologies. Well, it's Force Touch it's on their laptops, right?
Well, that's because that really uses the Force.
Yes.
Okay. Here we go.
Anyway, how close are you to your next iPhone? Just out of curiosity.
Well, I could get one at any time. Technically, I purchased my last one off contract, so I could get an upgrade at any point. It's just, do I want to commit to so many more years with the same company I've been with?
Yeah, or buy it outright, and then an iPhone 7 comes out, and that'll be even more amazing, or something, maybe.
The problem with buying it outright in Canada comes down to exchange rate.
Oh, man.
We pay almost double the price to get the same product.
It's painful. It's really painful. As
of late, you guys have been getting hammered.
Yeah. Yes. Our stable conservative banking system. What happens, though, is that our friends in the United States, they behave like a drunken sailor at a casino, but at the moment, they're rolling pretty well. So everybody's like, oh, great, America's back, and that's it.
Yeah, we're coming for your maple syrup next.
Coming for it. Oh, I was ready to go and buy outright like I did before, and then the prices came out, and I backtracked.
Yeah. So you could pick up a 6S, but you're sort of torn between doing that and getting a 7 because of the contract thing.
Exactly.
Mike, what about you? Your best Apple product this year?
Far and away, the best Apple product this year was the iPad Pro. They took into consideration enterprise concerns about document size. They took into consideration multitasking. If you look back at some of the things that the A9 processor could do, you could clearly see where it makes more sense with the A9X on the iPad Pro. You can clearly see where split screen is implemented better on the iPad Pro. Like when Steve Jobs introduced the App Store with the underpowered iPod Touch, we all said, what is this for? And then the iPhone came out, and then it was over.
Yeah.
And the iPad Pro is such a clear evolution of the iPad Air 2 that, we all saw it coming. The rumor mills for the iPad Pro were swirling for a long time, and we are so conservative with our rumors, but even you and I said, yeah, the iPad Pro is coming and it's going to be bigger. It is a fantastic piece of technology, and it's such an adjunct to my life now. iOS devices I used for consuming before, but I'm actually considering producing on the Pro.
Yeah, this is a point that I wanted to make, is that you actually own an iPad Pro.
Yes, I actually own. It was not given to me for review. I was purchased with my own money. So this is a thing. I did get the 32 gig because I really don't care.
Yeah.
I have no problem swapping things in and out. I keep stuff on my network for consumption. It's not a big deal to me. My use case, I don't need the larger capacities that people are whining about. But the iPad Pro, far and away, even though I'm a huge Apple TV fan, the iPad Pro, far and away, is Apple's best product for the year for me.
For me, I'm not just picking something different because you guys have already mentioned two of the best products that Apple came out with, and very clearly so. I have an iPhone 6S and I love it. I love the 3D Touch. I cannot wait for that to spread around to the other devices. But I'm going to pick Apple Music. Now, by this I mean the paid subscription service, not anything else. We'll come to that later. But Apple Music is the first streaming service that I've ever used. I've toyed around with other ones like Spotify and radio, but I dated them, but I married Apple Music. And the reason was, first of all, when they first announced that family memberships were going to be $15 a month, I was like, sold, done. And then as I used it, in particular, and I've talked about this before, the For You recommendations are just so good. And you can tell that they're very human curated. Now, 6 months in, we're getting a whole bunch of repeated playlists, because they're not adding new ones as fast as they did initially. But the ones they do, and they show up a couple of times a week, brand new ones I've never seen before, are just great.
Yeah, but they're only as good as the data you give it. That's something I need to keep emphasizing to people. If you skip that initial bubble selection of artists, your Apple Music is going to be terrible.
Yeah, who would do that?
Well, I refer you back to our polling in front of the Apple Store.
True.
Seriously, take 5 minutes and do the bubble polling thing in the beginning, talking about what you like, what you don't like. If you don't like a song, hit the don't play this song again button. Educate Apple Music a little bit, and you'll like it a lot more than you liked it before.
I certainly did. And even though I thought the questions were very vague in general when I went through it, the results have been phenomenal. It is very rare that they put a foot wrong, and I let them know when they do. But it both reminds me of albums I just haven't heard in many, many years that I would love to hear again. And it also makes recommendations for new things that I just wasn't aware of. So I'm learning a lot and listening to a lot of older great stuff that I was familiar with. On top of that, if any of it really strikes a chord, and a lot of it does, boop, it's mine, at least for as long as I keep paying anyway. But, it's in my library. It's available offline. It's great. It's just great. David Bowie's new album came out as we were recording this podcast, and I had it immediately and could listen to it immediately. And I live blogged it at work immediately.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I liked it. It was good. It's an awesome album. But anyway, plug over. So that was my best of. All right, Bradley, get ready, get set. Worst Apple product of the year.
So mine goes back to the software world, and it's one of the smallest things they released that many people probably didn't even notice. But when the latest version of iOS came out, there was a little tidbit in there called Tips. And I would just like to see it gone. It's a small app that occasionally gives you advice, and it's great if you're a new user, but after several months of getting these little notifications, it's kind of like, what left do you have to tell me?
Well, there's actually more to it than that, because a lot of people with older phones are getting, hey, you want to get a 6 Plus or a 6S, and you know where that hook comes from? That hook comes through the Tips app. It's not just something in the App Store.
Oh.
The things that Apple's pushing to you about, hey, maybe you want to get a new phone, it's through Tips.
Yeah, I think you're right. They put a foot wrong there. I don't get very many notifications anymore, but yeah, about once a month or so it will pop up with something and remind me that it's still there. The thing I don't like about it, and really, is that you can't delete it. Now, Tim Cook has promised to address this, not specifically about Tips, but about apps that Apple puts on that you could remove and it wouldn't damage the system.
Oh, what an enormous steaming load of crap. He's not going to do anything about that. He's not going to give you the ability to remove the Apple Watch app or anything like that. He might give you the ability to make it disappear, but if Apple decides it needs that app back, you know full well it's going to reappear.
Well, yeah, as soon as you buy an Apple Watch, you'll have it on your phone again. But for things like Tips, which is totally extraneous, either be more useful or go away.
Yeah.
The problem is it's neither fish nor fowl, and you can't get rid of it, and that's the problem. Mike, what about your worst Apple product?
iTunes turned into a burning dumpster. Apple Music came out and it was fine. Apple Music implementation was okay. But then it started eating people's music libraries alive.
Yeah.
And we did an extreme amount of testing on this to try and figure out exactly what the problem is. And Apple was working with us until Jim Dalrymple decided to make a big stink about it. And then they worked with him about it, which is fine. I don't care. They ultimately mostly fixed the problem. But for 3 months, iTunes would randomly change tags on you, change your album art on you, delete music, rearrange music, move music. And it's inexcusable.
Yeah. You made an excellent point that I thought at the time, which was no respect for the user's own library of music. Mm-hmm. This would also be my pick for worst of the year. So we have some collusion there. But it was unforgivable what they did to people's libraries. I'm so glad that now people just getting onto this boat don't have to worry about this too much. But for those of us who stayed the course and jumped on board early, this was one of the rare times when first-day downloaders really got screwed.
Oh, man. I personally avoided most of it because since I was at the hospital with my wife at the time, I didn't upgrade my home server as iTunes, which is where the home of my iTunes sharing library came from.
Right.
So it was untouched.
Lucky you.
But just complete random happenstance is that it worked that way. It's just because of the timing of life. And, 186 gigabytes of music otherwise would have been utterly mangled.
Yeah. I suffered less mangling than I think a lot of people did because I knew how to roll back in Time Machine and restore my library. And that fixed most of the problems, but it would still continuously change tags on me. The most common problem was that instead of the specific album that I had a single from, it changed it to the artwork for the greatest hits and the tags to the greatest hits album, which that single is also on. I sincerely hope that Apple has learned that lesson, that the first thing is do no harm to the existing files.
Yeah, I want to say that we started doing the testing on this right around episode 18. That seems about right. But if you go back and if you do a Google search on MacNN iTunes testing, you'll find all of the work that we did on it.
Mm-hmm. Take a look. And speaking of that, did we already plug the Feature Thief? I should do that. We're not rerunning the Feature Thief, but we have linked back to it. And if you haven't checked it out, it's been pretty popular.
And we're coming back to it in the next couple months. Again, we're not republishing the series, but we are adding a few more entries to the list.
Yeah.
Over the fall, we added disk utility.
Yeah, that's true. There's a couple more things like that are coming. And believe me, it's not going to stop. Every so often, they're going to gut a popular program and rebuild it from scratch. Usually that's a good idea, but it just takes a lot of time and you're out on the street until it happens. But sometimes, in particular, like I said, GarageBand, still angry about this. But sometimes they take features away and they just never bring them back ever. And that's the part that really steams my potatoes, Anyway. Well, I was trying to think of a non-curse word. Couldn't really succeed at that.
Yeah, it's late. We should probably wrap this up then, huh?
All right.
Wait. William's thing of the week.
Yes.
William's app of the week. Got to do that.
William is waiting in the wings, so let's get to him. Music. And as we often like to do, the last little bit of the MacNN podcast is William Gallagher with his app of the week. William, what do you have for us this week?
I have one little complaint about my app of the week this time. It's mildly hard to spell. Hard enough that you have to think about it, and hard enough that your Mac and your iPhone will keep on auto-correcting it. The app is Nuzzle. That's N-U-Z-Z-E-L. Now, both I and my Mac think that should be Nuzzle with an L-E. You may feel it should be Nuzzle with two Z's instead of two Z's. Transatlantic spelling aside, once you do finally get this on the App Store and install it, you tell it your Twitter and your Facebook account details, and then you let it fly. Nuzzle sits there on your iPhone, scanning and keeping on scanning your social media for news all the time. If 3 or more, roughly, of your friends on either service, Facebook or Twitter, share any article, Nuzzle reckons that's news. Actually, more than that, it reckons that this is news that you are likely to be interested in. So it will ping you a notification on your iPhone. It will tap you on the wrist if you have an Apple Watch. We must have some very sharing friends because we get notified an awful lot. But every time we think we've had enough now, Nuzzle pops up with something we did not know and that we are interested in. More, if you go into the iPhone app, instead of waiting to be notified of the latest thing, you get an Apple News or maybe a Flipboard-like list of articles. And they're not all from your friends. They can be, optionally, from friends of friends. And that's necessary. That's what's needed here. That's enough to open up Nuzzle. Just enough to stop meaning that you only get news about articles that your friends have written themselves, for example. Broadens you out a little bit and comes up with some surprising little nuggets and nuzzles you didn't expect. So I want to keep it on my iPhone, but I realize I can't remember what folder it's in. I'll forget that it's there if I don't move it to my front page. I definitely want to take it off my Apple Watch. I am sick of being tapped on the wrist, yet I also want to know the latest news. So I'm having a tussle with how to spell and how to use Nuzzle, but there is no question it is useful, interesting, and slightly obsessing me this week.
And that about wraps it up for episode 46. Of the MacNN podcast. I hope you will join us for 47, 48, 49, and then the big 50th podcast celebration. Woohoo, we'll have all kinds of sound effects that we don't normally use. On behalf of the entire staff of MacNN, I'm Charles Martin, the editor, wishing you a very happy new year, a great 2016, that Apple will pay attention to all these complaints we've just given them, do something about it, and that you'll stay with us for another great year of the MacNN podcast. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
As long as there's me, as long